You're listening to the Moon and Manifest podcast. Thank you so much for pressing play today. This is a gathering place for rebellious, freedom-seeking, highly sensitive paradigm shifters like you, who are sick and tired of disappearing into the wrong life. Here, we explore how sensitivity, soul, and emotions can help or hinder your dreams from coming true. You are wired for wonder, my love, and I am obsessed with weaving together science, stories, and sacred practices to guide you in living as your soul self out loud. I'm Lola Pickett, a highly sensitive soul, lunar lover, and moon manifestrix. The moon's wisdom is about learning to embrace your sensitivity and cyclical nature. Resilient embodiment of the moon's medicine has helped me create my 9-year sacred marriage, run a multiple 6-figure business, raise my highly sensitive kids, and so much more. Journey with the moon and me, and you can make your dreams a reality too. So much faster and more easily than you might think. Let's get started with today's episode. Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 121 of the Moon and Manifest podcast. I can hardly believe it. 121 episodes. Y'all, this has been such a journey. And so many times I have been tempted to not really pull the plug, but even recently I thought, I don't know if I have it in me to continue producing an episode a week, because that is a lot. It's a lot on top of running a business and being a CEO and also showing up for my communities and, not to mention running a household and being a parent to 2 kids, one of whom has special needs, and being a wife in an amazing marriage. It's pretty full plate. And yet it comes back to time and time again how sacred this space is, how much there is to share with you about not only how to thrive with sensitivity, but how to have compassion and genuine love for who you are and how you're made. And that's what keeps me coming back here, is really this deep desire to connect with you, to offer you new perspectives and tools and empower you for the journey. And that's, whether you listen to the podcast and you binge episodes and that's all we ever do together, or whether there are other opportunities for me to support you, all of it feels so sacred to me. And so I appreciate you being here with me, right? This is two-sided. As I said in last week's episode, resonance is mutual. It takes both ends of the guitar string being attached to something for that note to sing out. And so here I am attached here at the mic, and there you are attached to that speaker or that headphone. And in that connection, our nervous systems have a chance to meet. My frequency gets to mingle with yours. And it is such a beautiful, beautiful chance to connect. And I appreciate it so much. So before we get into today's topic, which is an interesting one, I'm going to be talking about empaths and neurodivergence. And I want to get into that because of not only my personal connections with having a special needs child, but also just some of the parallels that I see happen in our community space that I think might offer something to you, especially if you're in either the neurodivergent community and or the community of HSPs and empaths. And I'm going to share a lot about why those communities are overlapped so much. But before I do that, I wanted to just give a shout out, a listener shout out. So Amanda Matthews, she just sent in a review for the show. Thank you so much. And Amanda wrote, "So grateful my path led me to Lola. In October of 2020, I started to search for an empath podcast and was drawn to Lola after my second attempt. It instantly resonated with me. And after just a few episodes and taking notes, I opened up in a way that I never had before. And my life opened up. I saw myself and the relationships around me through a lens that had been blurred for decades. Although I kept hearing information from pathology, I was convinced the podcast was enough for me and resistant to spending money on the course. So glad my truth changed. Joining in pathology and Moon and Manifest has elevated all levels of my existence. If you have felt like you don't belong or that life is too overwhelming, this is where you need to be. Saying yes to myself has been the best investment I will ever make. Oh my gosh, Amanda. Thank you so much. It's been such a joy to have you in our space. Those of you who have the pleasure of being with Amanda when we're on our coaching calls know that her laugh is gotta be one of the best laughs on the planet. And I just went into our reviews to read a couple for the show and saw this for the first time just now. So this means so much that you said those things, Amanda. Thank you so much. I wanted to also share, this one is from Ava, who's another beautiful client. And these are the ones that are at the top of my reviews feed. So thank you so much. And if you want a chance to get shouted out on the show, then come over into Apple Podcasts and leave us a review so that I can connect with you. But Ava said, the show is a lifesaver. It's saved my life. Along with Empathology and the Moon and Manifest Collective, Lola and every person she interviews knows how to bring more ease and grace into our lives as empaths. Listening to the show has changed my life for the better, and I'm so appreciative for her compassion, kindness, and honesty. Each episode comes at the right time in my life, which has been answers to my prayers even. So much love to Lola, Tigre, and the communities. Thank you. Thank you, Ava. We love you. We love all of our people. It's a real honor to be able to offer that kind of support through the show, through Empathology, through the membership in Moon and Manifest Collective. It means a lot. And I am not always the best at raising the roof on how incredible those communities are and what happens in those spaces. I think because of what I talked about back in episode 119 about not wanting to be one of those coaches or personal growth people who wants to take all the credit for the results that happen in their programs, because I know it's two-sided. I know that it's us meeting that makes the magic happen. It's the caliber of human that comes into the space, matching the caliber of work that's offered that allows magic to happen, that allows that alchemy and that transformation to bubble and boil and turn into something completely metamorphic and incredible. It's two-sided. And so I really want to emphasize that I give my people so much credit for what they bring to the table when they come into the spaces that I create. And then together, anything becomes possible, right? That resonance is two-sided. It really goes into so many different areas. I hope that you had a chance to catch last week's episode, because I really get into that. And I think it's just a really powerful reminder that, first of all, if you resonate with someone, they're resonating with you and you're not making it up, right? We can really make up a lot of things. We can gaslight ourselves, which I talked about back in episode 119. Let's make a practice of not doing that and really holding the power that is mutual resonance. And since resonance is always mutual, we could just say the power that is resonance. So on to today's topic. I'm going to pull up my notes today. So before I get into this, I want to just make sure that you know, although I'm sure you're aware if you've listened to any episodes of the show, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a licensed medical professional. I'm not here to diagnose or treat any sort of condition, right? So this is not going to be like a diagnostic of, do you have ADHD? Here's how to know. I'm not here to do that. And I have mixed feelings about diagnoses like that. In my experience, they can be extremely helpful for contextualizing how someone with neurodivergence, someone whose brain and nervous system operates differently from the norm, and I have a problem with that I'll talk about in a minute. When you're someone with neurodivergence, to have like context for what that neurodivergence looks like, how it plays out in your nervous system, how it impacts your daily life can be absolutely life-changing. So I'm not anti-diagnosis at all. At all. I'm also not like anti-medication. I'm all about the right medicine at the right time, at the right dosage. Medicine being anything from pharmaceutical medications to coaching, to therapy, to exercise, to lifestyle choices, right? Like I don't look at medication just as a drug. Everything can be a healing influence, a tool, or a weapon. So I'm definitely not just anti these things. And that I think is really important because there are a lot of folks who just poo-poo diagnoses completely. But I'm all about the path of liberation. And the path of liberation is different for each one of us. Some of us are going to be liberated by getting that diagnosis and by getting that label. And so I'm all for it. Others are going to be liberated by leaving behind a label. Right. And there's an episode that I had with Lauren Polly, who was diagnosed as bipolar and has now left behind that label. And that was her path to liberation. So once again, that's my view. I am a vote for liberation, however that looks for you. And I'm not going to be here saying, oh, this is the path to liberation for you. You need a diagnosis. That's up to you to decide for yourself. And it can also change, right? Like it can be initially liberating to be label free. And then it might be more liberating at another time to have a diagnosis or a label. And vice versa. It could be liberating to have a label and then liberating to leave the label. So all those things are really important as we get into this because labels are big. They're charged. There's a lot of energy behind labels. They're not neutral, most of them. So as I get into this, let us try to maintain a level of neutrality around this topic. And once again, hold compassion for anyone who needs to function and thrive differently than the so-called norm. And here's why I want to speak to this a little bit, because I believe, and this is my personal belief, I believe that we are all somewhat neurodivergent to different degrees. I believe that we're all neurodivergent. Now, we have a homogenized and homogenizing culture, which means that the culture, because of the scale of human beings in it, really wants to water it down and make all of us as similar to each other as possible, normal, right? And so much of what's considered normal is actually toxic, inhumane, and dehumanizing. White supremacy is a normalizing, homogenizing mechanism of our culture that says the closer you are to white, that's the ideal, that's the norm. So I'm not a huge fan of norms in general, right? There's some benefit to mores and norms around behavior, morals, things like that. But when it comes to humans, we are all so different from each other. And in that difference, we're united. So to some degree or another, I believe we're all divergent. And that's really important because we can make ourselves wrong, and society will sometimes make us wrong for being divergent, but the truth is we all are. So when we talk about this, it's not to be seen as something that's wrong with someone or wrong with you or broken or needing to be fixed. Even when it's about a diagnosis, to my mind, it's not about a diagnosis of something wrong so it can be fixed. It's a contextualizing for support, which is really, really different energy, right? Like think about that. Instead of a diagnosis being a label of what's wrong so it can be fixed, what if it's offering context so that the best support can be made available for that person? So neurodivergent just means being diverse in the way that your mind and your nervous system and your brain work with regards to sensitivity, with regards to sociability, attention, the way that you learn, process language, mood and emotions, and it's not pathological, meaning it's not problematic. It's just the way that you're made. And that idea of having things be non-pathological is actually why I named my program Empathology, because I wanted to take something that feels like a problem, being an empath, being highly sensitive, right? Pathology, problematic, something wrong, and change it to empathology, the study of being an empath, being highly sensitive. That's why we call it the art and science of thriving as a sensitive soul, because we've taken what has felt or been labeled as pathological and are changing it into ology, right? The study of, the art and science of. So this is not about pathology ever in this space. I'm pausing this conversation for just a second to ask you a question. Are you here because you want to create change in your life, but you don't want to compromise who you are and you want to honor the fact that you are a highly sensitive soul? Then I'm going to invite you to listen to what becomes possible when you say a wholehearted yes to joining Empathology and our incredible community of students.
Empathology came in front of me and it gave me hope in a way that Western medicine had been failing me. So yeah, it was just a gift at the perfect moment.
This is really helping build a strong foundation and not a weak one to, help us carry on and kick butt.
So I want to say that Empathology really helped me get grounded and understand my own ways of responding to things in the external world.
And big vote yes for all things Lola and Tigray and Empathology. And I think that you should be too.
I'm so glad because I can just feel like this first week already has been huge and already have my money's worth in that.
Having the community and the class to work through stuff, it really opened me and my eyes to noticing what wasn't serving me anymore and what wasn't healthy and what my highest self was saying.
After all the feelings of, will I ever really feel something again? Am I not coping with something? Am I numb? And will I ever be able to process all the things that I know have happened? I'm open again.
What I would say to somebody who is considering Empathology is the support of everyone going through the program is second to none. Because yes, we are all in it together. We also support their sense of agency, and that is so empowering.
I love when I have the tools and can use them successfully, and it feels so great. It just feels so wonderful and so empowering, and to use them healthily, my powers as it would be, it's just been very, very positive.
Empathology gave me what I needed to get through that. So it's going to be so supportive in whatever your goals are right now, so supportive for you and your relationships and your relationship with yourself. So do it. There's no reason not to.
This is amazing because I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one. And I'm loved. And it's the growth. I mean, I took my life back from your class. I hope you know that.
Okay, it's me again. Aren't they the most incredible humans you've ever had the privilege to listen to? Well, when you're ready to create your version of these results, visit empathology.net to join the waitlist or register for this life-changing training, coaching, and community for empaths. I can't wait to welcome you inside. Once again, that's empathology.net. And now, back to this episode. Now, what types of neurodiversity are there? Neurodivergence, so to speak, neurodifference. There are a lot of different ways that we can name this. And I encourage you to pick a name that feels empowering to you, whether it's neurodifference, neurodivergent, neurodiversity. And some of the things that we see a lot in our communities are various forms of this, which include autism spectrum, Asperger's. We see a lot of folks with ADHD, OCD even. There's also other forms like epilepsy, hyperlexia, dyspraxia, even Tourette's, right? And so These can all be forms of neurodiversity. And together, they really do create strength. We don't want everyone to perceive things in the exact same way. That creates problems in a species. We need that neurodiversity. This is why back in my conversation with Amber Magnolia Hill, I said that highly sensitive people are the psychedelic plants of the human realm, right? Because we see things differently. We are, in effect, neurodivergent. And that is because a species is benefited by having a wide range of perspectives and access to information. Can help the species evolve, co-evolve with our habitat, with our climate, with our ecosystem in a mutually beneficial way. So in order to be the psychedelic plant, what we have to do is love ourselves for how we're made and embrace how we're made, not looking at ourselves as a problem to be fixed. One of the key pieces I asked my community in empathology the other day, I said, what do you now know was a mistake that you were making as a sensitive soul going about life that you are now aware was really harmful to you and probably to others too? But you didn't know it was a mistake at the time. And so many people came back on that thread by saying, my mistake is that I believed I was broken. I believed there was something wrong with me. And when we go around living our lives believing that we're broken, believing there's something inherently incorrect about us, what does that do to our capabilities, our capacities? How does that inform our behaviors and our decisions? What kind of patterns does that set into play for us? Certainly not, generally speaking, the most empowered ones, the most mutually beneficial ones. They become compensation patterns. And as I've said before in some of my work on money, compensation patterns affect our compensation very practically at a very root level. And that's why so many neurodiverse people, so many highly sensitive people, and so many empaths struggle financially, is because deep down inside, they believe they're screwed up. There's something wrong with them. And that, my friends, is a mistake. It's not true. It's not true. Now, I look at empaths and highly sensitives as a form of neurodiversity. Why? Because our nervous systems process input and data differently. We're neurodifferent. Our neural pathways are more plentiful. We have more synaptic activity, some of us. We have more open sensory gates, so we're taking in more information, which can lead to sensory overload. We also process emotions and input more deeply in our nervous systems, which can lend itself to more traumatic effect on our nervous systems. We are more susceptible to the impacts of trauma, which is why something that happens to us that might be minor, so to speak, in the eyes of others is huge for us, because our nervous system receives the impact of that trauma more readily. And if you're curious about that and what the differences are between being an empath and an HSP, go back in the episode library. It's episode 40 or 41. We'll link it up in the show notes. And you can learn more about the difference between being an empath and an HSP. There's overlap there, but they're not exactly the same thing. But I look at this as being, in effect, neurodiversity, neurodivergence, neurodifference. And I see it all the time in our community. We have so many people come in who maybe they knew they were ADHD, but they also really identify with the things I talk about of being an empath. Back in episode 1, are you an empath? Right? They're dealing with those same things, because what we need to do for those who are neurodivergent is help them support their nervous systems. That's why this body of work that I teach here on the podcast, that I share here, that I teach inside of empathology especially, That's why it ends up supporting so many folks who end up also having diagnoses of things like Asperger's, ASD, autism spectrum, ADHD, ADD. Because ultimately, what we need most as the population of neurodiverse humans is nervous system support. We need to understand ourselves so that we can thrive in our own way without trying to change who we are per society's perceptions of what's normal, good, or worthy, so we can have a rich life, an alive life, a life of deep presence and deep connection with no expense to our own well-being in the process of that connection, right? So among some of the gifts of being neurodivergent, like everybody is to some degree or another, but especially the folks maybe to a higher degree who are in this community, is that we have rich imaginations, highly, highly intuitive, and very perceptive of energy. And I have a child who's neurodivergent. He has been diagnosed with autism spectrum. He's 11 years old. And the medical community might label him as high functioning. I hate that, because what they're saying is that this person can function in our fucked up society. It's like, sorry for the brushed out cursing, but what I don't like about that is like, oh, this person has what it takes to make it in like our normal conditions. Normal. The toxicity of that homogeneity. And so I would never want to label him or anyone as high functioning, because it's high functioning in a dysfunctional culture. Yes, he's highly verbal. Yes, he's communicative. Yes, he's emotionally intelligent. But would I say he's high functioning? No, because I'm not interested in having him function in a dysfunctional world. I'm interested in having him thrive as a human in his choices, in his life, living in a way that's authentic to who he is. Just like I'm invested in that for all of my students and clients. It's the same. I'm not here to say, here's how you can make it in our broken world. I'm here to say, let's change the world. Let's make it more accepting, more humane, more tolerant of divergence and diversity. More celebrating, not just tolerant, fuck tolerant, celebrating, honoring, appreciating, validating, valuing, paying the gifts of that diversity and divergence. And one of the things you'll hear, especially about autism spectrum and Asperger's, is that there's low empathy, especially with autism. And I only have one child who's on the autism spectrum. And people say that, when you've met a child with autism, you've met a child with autism, because it presents so differently in every single person. So I'm not going to make a statement for all people who are on that spectrum. But what I know is that there is no low empathy that's happening. If anything, it's being so connected at a sensory and emotional level to everything that's going on around, that the only way to function, my favorite word, is to dial it down. So it's not that there's no empathy or low empathy. It's that there's a need to dial back the sensory input from somewhere. Sometimes it's to turn down what other people are feeling so that they can hear themselves through all the noise. But there's plenty of empathy there. And when that person is supported to navigate all that sensory input with more empowerment, the empathy's there and those connections are there. That person can create intimacy within their family and their friendships and all of that. I've seen that with my son. So I just feel like that's an important piece, because there's a lot of misconceptions around the various presentations of these neurodiverse aspects of ourselves. So we see in our community that there is a ton of overlap, right? And so people who may initially identify with being an empath or being highly sensitive, they might, if they were to go get assessed and evaluated, actually find they would get a diagnosis of something like maybe it's ADHD. Maybe it's a sensory processing disorder, not another favorite word of mine. There are a lot of crossovers. There are a lot of crossovers between empaths, highly sensitives, neurodivergents, and trauma as well. Not because everybody who's in these communities has had trauma or trauma has caused this neurodivergence, but because of the way that our nervous systems are wired, being more susceptible to trauma imprints, trauma responses, and patterns of protection means that the remedy, so to speak, is the same. It's nervous system support. When we heal our nervous systems, and by heal, I don't mean fix what's broken, but embrace, accept, channel, empower, that's healing. When we do that for our neurodiverse, empathic, and highly sensitive population of people, they go around knowing in their bones that they are whole, worthy, valuable, capable. And all of those internalized limits and glass ceilings start to fall away. And this, my friends, is how we change the dynamics of power in our society by empowering ourselves by way of self-acceptance, development of resilience, to show up ever more fully as who we actually are in our beautiful, radiant neurodivergence, difference, and diversity, and not just be highly functioning in a dysfunctional world, but change the game. Why? Because that's what the psychedelic plants are here to do. That's what we're here to do, is divergent humans, maybe just a little more divergent than the average person. So I hope this conversation has been illuminating and help you maybe accept some of your divergence, difference, and diversity internally as a wonderful gift instead of a burden or a curse. And know that whether it's continuing to listen to this podcast where there's so many resources and for you, so much support, whether it's listening to the show, coming into empathology, or joining us in the Moon and Manifest Collective to play with magic, I'm here for you. I celebrate you. And I look at our divergence, diversity, and difference as the keystone of our magic for transforming this world into a beautiful, mutually beneficial habitat for all beings. That's the big vision I have here. And I am grateful for you joining me in that vision and helping me co-create that way of being one person at a time. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next week. Bye for now. Thank you so much for being here and choosing to complete this episode. That tells me that you have it in you to do what it takes to change your life, even if you don't quite believe that about yourself yet. To that end, I have 2 invitations for you, love. The first one is simple. If you find yourself nodding your head as you listen to the show and deeply resonating with what gets shared here, then you're going to love the soothing meditation I've put together for you. Normally available just for my Moon and Manifest Collective membership, I'm now sharing my Soul Self Subliminal Activation audio with you. This restorative, empowering hypnosis contains no words you can hear, but is imprinted with my voice and vibration, along with binaural beats and gentle music. It's perfect to listen to as you fall asleep, to integrate everything you're receiving from the show. To download this free audio now, simply come to moonandmanifest.com/activate and enter your email so we can send it to you. That's moonandmanifest.com/activate. Secondly, if you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe to the show and leave us a review on iTunes. Your review helps other folks like you find this podcast. Together, we'll make this world a place where we are more in tune with nature and more sensitive souls than ever before are unapologetically thriving. Hell to the yes. All right, my love. Thanks. Be well, and I'll see you next time.